I became more of a Bitcoin over time then, just to comment on like, what is there in Bitcoin or why is it worth anything? And that I did come into it more from a technology angle first, but then in the kind of context of our monetary system and like the financial landscape, Bitcoin, it's grown into a significant role. So it's in there in kind of the statement of like, well, the number one blockchain, number of users of the blockchain are Bitcoin holders.
Hello and welcome to Tuesdays with Morrisey, where we share insights from great thinkers. So I'm excited to be joined by Joseph Kelly, co-founder and CEO of Unchained, as we kick off our 4-part mini-series on the alternative asset market. Joseph, thanks for coming on the show.
Stoked to be here, Adam.
I'm excited to have a conversation exploring Bitcoin, crypto more broadly, and what you guys are building at Unchained. For listeners who aren't familiar, your team launched Unchained in 2016. So a little bit of the history of Bitcoin through pricing. Bitcoin was first introduced in 2009, initially with a basically value of 0, traded under 100 until about 2013, spiked to 1,000 for the first time that year before, a correction, then mostly traded in the low hundreds until 2017, where it began really the first big run to 20,000. You guys started in 2016. What did you guys see going on in the years leading up to that inspired you to start Unchained at that time?
Yeah, my co-founder and I, we'd sold a business in 2013 and bought some Bitcoin and started really thinking about or taking it more seriously after that. And in the pain of what it's like to start a startup company, and that what you learn from that, you really want to try to get a lot of things right up front. Like what looks like a really good bet. What makes this the best possibility of success? And I started definitely filling my head more with like, and I think around then, like Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 came out, or like you should have these books that really help give some rationalization to like your dart throwing as an entrepreneur, perhaps, of just like what are you going to do and invest into. And so I think certainly one of my models was around contrarian thinking and what is everybody thinking today is like the hot thing or like the thing to do, but that makes it overpriced. But over here, there's this other opportunity that's perhaps underpriced. And then like that company was kind of an enterprise software. And enterprise software, you have like Gartner and they're like Magic Quadrant, or they have the really good version of the hype cycle of like what is the thing that's at its peak of inflated expectations versus then like the trough of disillusionment afterwards, of like the hangover of like, oh, we thought this thing was like, it's just kind of like the internet in the early 2000s had this peak of inflated expectations moment, and then it's like, oh man, internet. Meanwhile, companies like Amazon got built, or like Google started, or like these kinds of things. So I think with Bitcoin and that same price history, you saw, that there's a real emotionality to that. Like there's a real way that like the market holds certain ideas at certain times, and I mean, it just seemed really clear that whether it's reflected in the price, but certainly in just people's attitudes about Bitcoin, that the price kind of reflected. It's just the doldrums there for a long time, under $100. Like, will it ever rise again? Is it about the blockchain technology? I don't know. Bitcoin. That was a way to also kind of sound smart in looking at this stuff even then. And then we kind of learned from that prior business too of starting in the big data era, feeling like we kind of started at big data just before, in fact, like we could map it before the peak of inflated expectations, and we kind of rode that wave and sold the business, I think, like near the peak of that wave, maybe in 2013. And so we understood what these cycles mean, or just how like kind of picking your wave to put your surfboard on, kind of a thing can be important. And then with Bitcoin, I think that the technology narrative also kind of never made sense to me. That it was sort of like what we learned in that prior business was just building big data technology for like people generally doesn't really make a very successful company. You got to be doing something specifically for someone that like becomes a business model. And I just could see, if you're trying to start a blockchain company, the number one blockchain users are Bitcoin holders. So like go where the blockchain users are. It's like they're kind of stamping out blockchain in different industries. It's kind of a troubled thesis then. It's something people like, maybe the dam will eventually break, but a lot of waves have broken up against the challenges of starting a business in that sort of model. So I think between that and, honestly, I became more of a Bitcoin over time then, just to comment on like, what is there in Bitcoin or why is it worth anything? And that, because it does touch I did come into it more from a technology angle first, but then in the kind of context of our monetary system and like the financial landscape, Bitcoin, it's grown into a significant role in that world.
And what was the initial thesis for Unchained?
Yeah. So it's in there in kind of a statement of like, well, the number one blockchain, number of users of the blockchain are Bitcoin holders. We're the Bitcoin holders. And we did an analysis actually early in like 2015 and in that era before we started the company. And now has a nice trademark name to it, or a time trademark, HODL waves. And if you look at it, it's basically looking at all the addresses on the Bitcoin blockchain and counting their like age, like when was this address last used? And so you can see there's like this strata, this tratiation of Bitcoin over time as more and more people hold it as a long-term investment asset. And so as then and even now, and it's fluctuated, but like roughly usually 60% of all Bitcoin hasn't moved in a year or more. And so that contextualized the market for us. That was like who are the long-term holders and what do they need? And then understanding that, Bitcoin is money. It's a monetary asset. Most all other monetary assets, there's becomes a sector of banking services that look like lending, that look like helpful custody, that looks like other kinds of transaction support or reporting. And so that just kind of then became our menu and place to apply a business model on top of, really, really investigating and doing like, okay, like, well, what is really new here about Bitcoin? Like what should look different about financial services for the long-term Bitcoin holder versus the financial services for like, a retail investor buying things on Robinhood or stuff like that. So it's been an exploration too, as well. What was the technology need for this kind of financial services?
And so much has happened in the last 10 years. Like when you look back, are you like, hey, like we got the right things right? Or has the thesis had to shift over time?
And the thing I'm most thankful for is that we got the customer, I think, like segment right. And I like that that's been able to be a North Star like for the business the whole time. Because I think pivoting out client set, I think you can always add clients over time, but then like to have to change customer archetype from like retail to enterprise or to institute, that stuff is really painful ways to try to steer the ship. I think we could have maybe sequenced our products differently, or just like knowing what I know now, I would have, prioritized certain things. But we've done the best we can. And, we have a pretty full suite of financial services now. And so, the ordering still at the end of the day doesn't have to matter too much. I just think it's so hindsight, what you would have known with more proficient information.
Of course. And how would you explain like the set is financial services that Unchained customers can get to maybe somebody that doesn't know a ton about cryptocurrency, but will have a basic understanding of retail and commercial financial services using the US dollar?
Well, part of it starts as like a technology story. And we constantly struggle with that identity challenge between being both a financial services company and a technology and product company. But the way we help our clients secure Bitcoin, and we now help many thousands of them secure around $12 billion of Bitcoin today. But the way they're holding it with us is in a format where they're holding some of their own keys. And keys are some of the like essential and necessary technology to how Bitcoin works. And it's how you authorize transactions on the Bitcoin network is using a key to sign for it. Now, our clients use what are called hardware wallets to hold those keys. These are like offline devices or things you only plug in your computer when you need it. And they're securing these in secure physical locations. And we're kind of helping them in their entry into working with us, like with that setup, or helping, a lot of people might have questions. It's new technology. Did I do this correctly? Am I storing this the right way? If my son or daughter get to it, if, something happens to me, like, those are questions people face when they want to secure Bitcoin in this way. And, there's a type of story about like why you want to do it. Like holding your own keys is a property of Bitcoin, and not everyone needs or wants it. But at least for us, some clients are working with us. They're holding keys with us together. It's called collaborative custody. And then that's really what we kind of figured out, or what I'm talking about. Like, what are we solving for when we want to make financial services work in this like Bitcoin native way? And this is the closest you could say, we've all come up with, I'd say, like as an industry, with some other, types of exceptions or applications we can talk about, but for like the truly direct relationship-based financial services we provide, this format is novel, only the kind of thing you could do on Bitcoin. You can't have many like, quote, banks with $12 billion in assets. Well, like at that point, the bank is like, it's the bank's money, or like they're lending it out, or like they're doing things with it. We don't get to do that with our client assets. We don't have that more majority control. And then clients can buy and sell through us, Bitcoin to dollars. Our clients can hold some of that Bitcoin in an IRA account. So that's a supported format or account type for us. We have a lending desk. We'll lend dollars against Bitcoin. And that was actually our first product. Our first service was lending against Bitcoin as collateral. So we were one of the first firms to begin doing that. And then we have a advisory service or advisory arm that will do financial planning and help people with like tax returns and tax questions. And that is now actually merging into a trust company we started. So the trust company can do, even though there's some from the higher end, like trust administration and helping be a trustee for different family asset setups. So it's a pretty broad range at this point. And it's like taking a lot to get a pretty full menu, but yeah, in some ways we're still just started.
Is that right? You think so? 12 billion in assets and just getting started?
Yeah, it's like, it's you never feel like all your products are complete. You're like, oh, you're still not where they could be. And so then, but I do feel like in terms of the there's just a flywheel as a business, or like an ecosystem of value for people. Once your Bitcoin is stored in this way, you want to not have to think about it. Well, if I don't have to think about it, like how do I make sure then like my inheritance problems or other large purchases or investments I want to make, like I can utilize this capital asset for those things.
Yeah, how'd you guys get around like customer education and distribution? Like, what was that journey like for you guys?
Great question. I mean, kind of even like an internal story is just kind of what made something actually have product market fit when it's a little bit both a product and a service, and it's in this new market, of newly created Bitcoiners. And you kind of get to watch like demographically where people come in through cycles. People really cluster in. We see the clients that came in who got Bitcoin before 2013. You see the ones that kind of like me, like kind of got in at that one bull run in 2013, or some that come later in 17. And Bitcoin's had this kind of cyclical, like 4-year, kind of thing happening for it. People come in like that, and so there's like a meme propagation thing happening, right? It's like like Bitcoin the meme. Is Bitcoin
Very much want to talk about that.
Is Bitcoin something I want? Yes or no? Okay. How do I get some? Where do I get some? And then once I have it, what does it mean? What can I do with it? What should I do with it? And then like I think people then like get sorted into buckets. You can just kind of philosophically like where Bitcoin's rooted from in any kind of cypherpunk or anti-authoritarian, sovereignty-minded, individual sovereignty kind of minded thing that then uses these cryptographic tools to like frame, like have to have that impenetrable defense or something like this. So that's in the spirit of these technologies in a lot of ways. And so especially a lot of the people who are like evangelists for Bitcoin are like, the people with hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers or many oftentimes talking about self-custody as an idea. Like, why should do it? So then that's what I think carries a lot of the wave of education for people. And then we staff up as well. And like, it's important to have good salespeople that can face clients on consultations and kind of walk them through like why they would want to store their Bitcoin this way, or like what's their current setup and can we help? And then we have people on staff that do the onboarding or like spend the hour or two with the client to get familiar with these hardware wallets, understand how they interface with the Unchained application, answer questions about where they should secure them. And so, yeah, it's like, that's sort of, it's like, who knows, like in 10 years when maybe this is just more common practice, or like the steady, stable 30 or 40% or whatever it is of people who choose the self-custody versus ETF or otherwise, like wherever that plateaus out to, and those are already educated and the tools are different, we may not have to have so much of like an education arm on this sense, but just for where we are in the adoption curve, it's necessary.
Yeah. When you're sharing your story around trust and security and stewardship, all these things, it stands in contrast to a lot of stuff that goes on in the crypto world. Media points, it kind of positions Unchained, the way I see it, as kind of like adults in the room oftentimes. So how do you guys like, I've had friends that I've like interviewed at crypto funds, and like the founder of the crypto funds, like his picture on the website is a meme. It goes by an alias. What do you think about like the noise in the space, and like how do you guys maintain just staying above the noise?
It's a mix. I think there's certainly a team dynamic, or like ingredients of me and my co-founder, for instance. Um, he's just he's skeptical by default of a lot of things, and is a very strong technical mind. And was like in grad school for physics, was on a path to getting a physics PhD before we yanked him out to start our first company. But I think that kind of attitude really helps keep things pretty clean, or like keep like the hypey, stuff without like technical merit out of the picture. And then I'd say we've had also otherwise like, some Bitcoin in general, a lot of the people that are in it and find their way to it tend to be very like stubborn and, principled, or like really, really intellectually like centered on a certain way of things, looking at the world. And I have to give some credit, because like in a lot of ways they've been right, so like there's something working there. There's something at work, and called the Austrian, or, otherwise like certain views that you didn't see in like the white paper didn't talk about things in this way, but it's like the realm of economic ideas that Bitcoin is about, has proven a lot of like, some decent truth. But anyway, so I think having then that culture in our team that really cares about this thing that is Bitcoin, and that our clients also really care about, it's really aligning, really great, cultural just thing, I think, for a company that had to be so mission led, along with your clients. And we have real experience. We supported Ethereum for a year from like 2018 to 19. It was only ever about the percentage of points of our loan book. Never had the same kind of adoption for our style of loan in that community. And it was a kind of a technical nightmare. Like just keeping your Ethereum node alive required constantly syncing it to like the latest version. And it's the kind of software that needed like kicked over every week. And so like when we decided to stop supporting it, there was days of cheers, in our tiny engineering team. But, and so there's just something to like the stability, the robustness of Bitcoin, to the idea of just like kind of focusing on what's going to still be here through cycle, and like, not risk things. And then, because that's kind of what you saw in the demise of BlockFi, RTX, or these firms, through that last cycle, was people taking a lot of excess risks in the very short term, that caused them to blow up. And we can talk about more of the contours of that kind of thing later. But yeah, just that, your number one job is to survive as a financial services company as well, and then just focus on what's important there. And so it's felt like just that, as you point out, kind of something like just that competency aspect can really help you stand above the noise.
Being in the space for so long, do you have any more insight than the average person on the actual origin of Bitcoin?
Oh yeah, Satoshi's identity or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I think we're all on pretty even territory there in terms of that. I mean, there's cool, that mix of like academic and or just like the researchers, or the kinds of people Satoshi cited, and what kinds of ideas was he on to? What was the thing that, because Bitcoin is a patchwork or a assembly of like at least three existing ideas, or pre-existing ideas that just kind of brought together. And he did that in a unique way, or they did, and they made some unique choices as well about like things like it's 10-minute block times, or kind of is the way that Bitcoin mining works. So and then also just like coded it up, delivered a working application. That there was later a lot of pruning, that's little known. There was like a lot of things that early on the Bitcoin software was capable of in terms of transaction types, kind of the way you've seen like the Ethereum or Solana or otherwise narratives are like, oh, but Bitcoin is too constrained. You want to do like cool world computer applications, you need these other transaction types. You need another blockchain that does this. Bitcoin, yeah, and truth had some of that more greater like smart contract type functionality early that a lot of that early dev saw like a lot of flaws in them, or like just saw like a lot of ways that exposed the network to issues. And so a lot of the early work in the early years was kind of like pruning that back to something more like the Bitcoin we have today.
Generally, it seems that, Bitcoin is at the highest when times are good. And it, sometimes some would say it's earned a reputation of being, in that regard, somewhat a speculative currency. In the sense of like, you know, yeah, like, I read an article a couple of years ago. They talked about like, can't remember what they said wasn't the new luxury, but speculation was, like, the ability to speculate. And I think you could take that to extremes with like meme coins and stuff. Hey, I had the luxury to throw to YOLO, as they say. I mean, how do you think about the underlying value of cryptocurrencies? I think we can spend most of the time on Bitcoin, and like, where do you see them fitting in? Not all, either from like an economic standpoint or an investing standpoint or a practical application standpoint.
I think it's multi-layered at this point. Some of the biggest value of Bitcoin is if I have one, I can trade it for $114,000 right now. Like it kind of has a self-fulfilling monetary asset kind of quality to it. And I think one of the things, because you're talking about Bitcoin as a risk asset, one of the things it does trade or price historically, I think that's some of the strongest correlation with is, I want to say M2, or it's basically the money supply. So that's not unlike a lot of other assets, but it's at least, it's like, damn, if they are like making a lot more money, at least can I own the thing that like keeps up with the money they're creating. So finding deviations from that, or things that like outperform the money creation in the short term. And that's where there's kind of a way, seeing cycles enough, seeing the like the Cantillon effect, or like seeing just the kind of switching to see the world as a world of flows, not like just stock or just like, companies worth X. That means it's like somehow, so and so's worth $100 billion. That means it's somehow liquid 100 billion, or it's like, so, or that you can like,
yeah, like a less static view.
Yeah. I think once you kind of look at that flow, and then you kind of then understand, Bitcoin is something of a sink, or like a sink at like kind of the end of that flow, or like a place that like kind of value goes in and then gets held for a long time. And then there's other qualities, and then like the windows or shocks we get as we understand what the Canadian government's crackdown on the trucker protests the other year was, like what that means for your money, what it means when like SVB fails, or like over the weekend, startups and business owners don't know if they're going to be able to hit payroll like the next week. So those kind of things, then wake you up to like what else is there we don't see, just because the current financial system's kind of the kind of water we're swimming in. It's like, economic fish here. So like, what do you mean it works differently? What is water? What is money? Kinds of things. And so that's, I think then in that way, like Bitcoin is also a great meme to teach people about money. It's a great, then like it becomes an asset on top of like a increasingly digital, increasingly interconnected, increasingly global, and not in some ways, but like that, how does that not feel like an inevitability that just like that doesn't really stop? And what this administration did more recently too, was in a big way sort of remove the threat of final boss for at least some time. Who knows what future Senates and White House occupants like will want to say or have to do about Bitcoin. At least for now, we've kind of called that off, and it's only going to increase as like more banks and other parties that weren't active like are now starting to lean in again. Then it's like, okay, then this is only going to become more systemically important and embedded.
I like I remember hearing stories like, hypocrisy. Thank you, Jamie Dimon. Like I remember, and it's tough to tell what's all true, especially if you just see it in passing. But well, like big financial leaders will over time have said things like, oh, well, like it's never going Bitcoin crypto is never going to take off while having relatively substantial holdings in it.
Yeah, well, I think, and I mean, the JP Morgan one, it's interesting, right? I think like, on a couple levels, I mean, the idea that there's definitely an innovator's dilemma kind of thing, the Christensen idea. And you have that at multiple levels. You have that kind of at like the Bitcoin monetary asset level. You have it from like the business models of banks, which tend to look like taking in client assets and then lending those out, or having, like taking in people's cash, parking in treasuries for several percents, and like just minting yields of things like that, or at the banks that like, banks are involved in the money creation process. As they create loans, they're creating money, and they get to do that at little to no cost of capital. But then Bitcoin comes along, and back to like the Unchained model, we're not sitting on the client Bitcoin. Can't do that. And the firms that applied that logic looked like BlockFi and Celsius and these others. And that's where I kind of use this like tree of life analogy, that it's sort of like there's the the current branches of the tree of life, that is the financial services like ecosystem or environment, or like jungle of the trillions of dollars in asset management, and all the ways money moves around between banks and stock exchanges and institutions and all that. Like that's just grown out of a context, like a petri dish of some rules of law, like our regulations, like the form of money we have, and that kind of ecosystem. And that like some of the thesis or the view from Unchained is that Bitcoin is it's almost a different tree, or it's maybe it's kind of grafted onto this like fiat tree for now, but it's really it also has like a different base, or like a substrate, or like, I don't know if life grew up in like they theorize, right, that like there could be life in methane based environments just as well there are in like more like water and oxygen based environments. So I think that's like not like resoundingly agreed science or something like this yet, or they haven't proven it, but like in that kind of an idea, to say that Bitcoin is a bearer asset that people can hold themselves, that's like globally portable, that has absolute scarcity baked into it. This is not really an invention humans have had before. I read nothing with all these like kinds of monetary properties. So what happens when that really takes off, or that is like suddenly the monetary substrate we use?
So, two things that I thought about a lot when it comes to, probably specifically Bitcoin adoption, or I guess it's Bitcoin and blockchain, but like, I remember I worked at a startup, and we were doing some things with energy efficiency. And as part of that, we, started to like explore the idea of carbon credits. So we like eventually were talking to a public utility, and they have this big balance sheet, and like this other consultant put together some model that was like, hey, like if we, and I don't even know exactly what what was going to happen, but anyway, some sort of digital securitization was going to happen that was going to unlock these savings and these credits. And the two things that I've always struggled with is like, one, it's like all these things that people plan to put on the blockchain, why do they really have to be on the blockchain to do it? That's one. And then the second thing I'd like to get your thoughts on is that in terms of an option, it's like, all right, so this CFO or this treasurer of this public utility would be the one. Well, first you'd have to convince a bunch of people, but then he'd be the one signing off on it. And I just wonder about the personal risk that individuals are willing to take at large organizations to move the adoption. Yeah. It'd just be a lot of personal risk, because like it doesn't work. I mean, you will lose your job.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably like a good Charlie Munger quote on these lines, where the kind of idea that like there are two hard problems, or problems that are like too damn hard. You're trying to like solve three different incentive mismatches at once, or something like this. And I think that's some of what happens when you're like you're talking about things that remind me of an enterprise sales process, or like how are people going to put their from the line. And then what things that look like blockchain sometimes have a nature of something like a co-op, like the kind of thing that exists in data industries as well. Firms that have marketing data on a segment of customers like agree to sort of pool that data so they can kind of remarket within each other. And that's a somewhat established thing. And there's people and companies, businesses that compete at that and work to bring on the people and incentives line, but it's still hard. You're doing around this like focus thing, and people understand. Just like, oh yeah, this enriches my data. It's a very specific kind of thing. I think that's sometimes the problem of any blockchain things is how do you sell somebody on something specific that does a job 10x better or has 10x savings that is like specific to that decision. That doesn't depend on having to get 1,000 people to say yes first. How do you get the first 10 to say yes? Is something what you're saying?
Yeah, one kind of want to talk about at least one practical application. I saw this past week in the Wall Street Journal. This company called Inversion Labs is raised $27 million at $100 million valuation to basically do, first you had the roll up, which we're going to do an episode on entrepreneurship through acquisitions, whatever. So you had the roll up, then you had the VC roll up, and now it seems this company is doing basically acquiring low margin companies and outfitting them with blockchain to increase efficiency. Like from a practical application standpoint, like what might that look like?
I could see versions like anything that has like trade finance and or cross-border vendor supplier relationships, and like the need to move dollars or money across that ecosystem, like stable coins, honestly are start to become a thing. Title insurance potentially. It's still these applications you deal with like registry problems. Still a ton that's brittle in between anything that you quote touches the real world, and then you're managing on a blockchain, or that where then somehow moving cryptographic tokens is useful. I think that and honestly, when I look at these things, I just look at like the crypto is still a great capital market to like raise money for like good ideas. If you can get quote, I almost said get away with it. If you can do it, without getting your foot chopped off by a regulator or something like this. Like you just I think and so it's very like open season for a lot of ideas. And again, I kind of see this in bigger waves, or like really big, like bigger, like infrastructure building cycles. It's just kind of when you get these supply demand mismatches, and for now you have a big supply of a lot of wealthy crypto holders and like a lot of stable coins out there that are quote looking for yield kinds of things. Like there will be schemes that get come up with to then part ways or have those holders put money into working projects. The particular one about like rolling up the entities and then putting blockchain tech in there. I'm beyond like transaction efficiencies, like when maybe cross-border payments and stuff like that. I think just some of the truth is you haven't seen a lot of applications outside of the realms of speculation, buying of JPEGs. I'm not really that familiar with like Solana and some of these other places, but and I do think things like, damn, it wouldn't be great if the I do think that sports tickets or like things that have like a really unique you're going to a venue at a particular time and you're a ticket holder, and then but you want to sell that to someone else, or it's like you show up with that. It's neat, right? Like it's kind of the same as technology, just really makes sense. But the business of tickets and like the entrenched forces, the monopolies that are already at stake in that kind of context, like are just make it not today's problem. Not something kind of would happen today, but could be great, and it could be neat if we have more infrastructure and like adoption of keys and cryptographic technology that can make the exchange or transfer of token type things easier. Like that makes sense to me.
Yeah, there's enough kind of noise and momentum. To your point, like I think about it in the context of the great wealth transfer too. Like any balance, I don't know what financial advisors would say the percentage is, but any balanced portfolio likely has some cryptocurrencies in it.
Yeah, I think if that doesn't, it's lost out a lot. And there's
you mentioned InfoChamps earlier. You and the same team, a lot of the same team members, built and sold a tech company. While you were sharing that, I was thinking about how disorienting any startup can be. I remember thinking, like, it's hard to know if killing it or dead. Is it been, like, from your experiences, like, was it exponentially more disorienting to build Unchained because you are operating in an industry that is more disorienting than enterprise tech?
Yes and no. I mean, I do think, shoot, that enterprise, like understanding big data, cloud computing, this new thing called Hadoop, like, there's a lot going on. And then also, being in my 20s, I also didn't know a lot about like the problems at my customers, frankly, or like at these big enterprises. Like I'm kind of learning those in the front lines with the rest of my team too. So and they're also learning about it. They're, that's part of what made big data new and that kind of a thing. So, yeah, but, I don't know. I think just through that experience, it was a lot more painful. Not to say Unchained hasn't had like dark days and like, tough nights, but, man, if, yeah, I think I was just like through the trauma of that first company's experience, I was primed to like get a certain set of other things right at Unchained and then make new mistakes. And then, largely that's been true.
It's a funny thing, when you're a second time founder, everyone probably thinks you're crazy, but you're also way more trustworthy. I saw in your background somewhere, is it true you spent time living and working on a sailboat?
Yeah.
Right. What's the backstory there?
So I was originally born in Anchorage, Alaska, and my mom, unfortunately got cancer and died when I was 14. And my dad had always had a dream of, sailing around the world, like going like full circumnavigation. And so he talked my sister and I into kind of leaving school. It didn't take much convincing. I was down to do it. So after my sophomore year that summer, we drove to Florida, bought a sailboat, named it after my mom's. It was called Jean, and lived on that for close to 3 years. So until I kind of turned 18 and decided to do other things. But yeah, it was a great adventure. I did like kind of a homeschool independent study program, and got really close with my dad and sister while we were out that whole time, and very, very rewarding and transformative.
Yeah. Do you think that was a spark for your entrepreneurship journey?
Yeah. I can remember, just how it felt to be out on the water or away from land and like with just the two people that matter to you most, or just, these kind of things. You kind of have learned, you feel deeply what your heart really wants to prioritize. And so, I kind of looked to entrepreneurship to maybe be a path to do that. There's an irony there because, you think maybe you don't want to work for somebody. You don't want a boss. So, okay, you're independent, you want to be autonomous. And then you are CEO of something and you realize, oh, I've got 140 employees. Like, oh, like kind of my bosses. We got a board. I've got investors. We've got 10,000 customers. Like actually I have way more bosses than I figure if I would if I just had one. So, it's a dimension of, personal growth in a lot of ways, which is nice.
It's funny. I didn't think about this until now, but the first Tuesdays of Morrisey episode I ever did 4 or 5 years ago was with a professor out of the UAB, University of Alabama, Birmingham. He was at DePaul before, but his book is about comparing entrepreneurs of today to the seafarers of the age of discovery. Talked about, hey, like these guys were raising the equivalent of venture money from the royals to do high risk, high reward expeditions with no certainty of ever coming home.
Yeah. So the crew on it, they had to get the gear.
A lot of his book is about managing mutinies, because in both entrepreneurship and seafaring, mutinies are commonplace.
That's why I always kind of felt, there's different modes of leadership, but I did always appreciate Shackleton's story, right?
That endurance.
Yeah, it's the book about it, and it was the name of the boat, and like the fact that 150 men get stranded down there. They're down there for 18 months or whatever before they get home, or it's long. Nobody died, and so that's kind of sometimes the model I like and where I look for it in myself at Unchained, between just leaders take care of their people, nobody dies here, kind of a thing a little bit. So, Yeah, that's great. And I think it's how, like, what does it take to succeed in Bitcoin? It's kind of an endurance exercise.
Yeah. I mean, for you guys especially, I mean, like, you guys built this for the long term. What is like, what time horizon do you use to look into the future, and kind of what are you seeing today that'll lead us? I'm just curious, like, kind of what time horizon are you looking towards with Unchained and Bitcoin and this technology? And then, like, what are you foreseeing?
I think there's thankfully always been something of like at least 5 to 10 year horizon, but and then dang if they have, like, now that we're 10 years in, it's like we've already gotten through a few of those early horizons. But thankfully, getting back to the idea, the horizon keeps expanding. So there's just kind of, it's a little more of the same. And also, I think again, at the edges of these technologies, things like how people use their wallets, what enables them to use wallets to access their crypto, how usable is that software, how are people, like, holding it on their phones or holding it on their devices, at the edges of that. And then, like, business applications like remittances. I don't know what the heck's gonna happen with, like, banks using stable coins in the US. I think it's gonna go through a really big wave over the next year and few years. And then, like, TBD how it'll really settle, if, like, some of that, its value really proves warranted. And so, yeah, time horizons is a tricky problem, but I think the other area is just in a very Bitcoin focused sense, and thinking about it as an asset that it's always had the promise of layer twos that come on top of it, like Lightning, that can affect transfers of other assets, or and so I think that, and here I'm sort of paraphrasing or channeling my co-founder, but he helped articulate, I think, a really good vision for what application layers can be built on Bitcoin once you have networks that like Tor. Like, Tor is the type of thing you transmit files on. What does file sharing look like in a network that's a little more integrated with, like, Bitcoin payments, and how the topology of a Lightning network routes data can then also route other kinds of data. So we'll see. There's just kind of that I think, part of Bitcoin's next chapters that's still a very TBD type thing, while it's still, like, just steamrolling on as a monetary asset that's understood by more people worldwide.
Yeah, I look forward to watching it too. Joseph, you've been really gracious with your time today. What's the best way for people to keep up with you, the work you guys are doing at Unchained, or just generally the industry?
Well, we have a Twitter handle at Unchained. My own is at Joseph Kelly. We're at unchained.com. Happy to email me, joe@unchained.com. And yeah, if you need any help or anything on your Bitcoin journey, feel free to be in touch.
Awesome. We'll have links to all those in the show notes. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome, Adam. It was great.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Tuesdays Morrisey. That conversation was with Joseph Kelly, co-founder and CEO of Unchained. What I enjoyed about the episode was hearing about some of the technologies and applications that have been developed in Bitcoin, and ones that may be on the horizon. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with a friend, and we'll see you here soon. Thanks.